Welcome to the final optional walkthrough video of the GDS 102 Photoshop course. In this video, I'm going to show you guys how to export. So as you can see, I've created this image here using the tools, shortcuts, and layers already covered in stage 2. I'm pretty happy with the finished product. I'm ready to save, I'm ready to export, and that's what this video is going to be all about. So saving it is pretty simple. It's pretty much what you would expect if you have any familiarity with really any number of programs, Adobe or otherwise. What you want to do is come up to your top nav bar, click on File, and come down to Save As. If you've already saved your file somewhere, you can always just click Save and it'll save it as the same file type in the same location, so you don't have to go through the whole Save As process. But we're just going to treat this as though it's not saved yet, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Save As. After I click on Save As, you'll see this Save As window appear. You have the option to navigate through your computer's folders to pick the save location that you want to save inside of. I'm already where I want to be saving, so I'm going to go ahead and stay in this folder. You can change your file name here. I'm going to change it to Kikis for the kitties in the image. And you'll notice the default save type next to save as type is a Photoshop or .psd file. And what a Photoshop file is it basically saves all of your settings, all of your layers, everything. It doesn't compress it into a single image. It's so you can open up this document and keep working on it where you left off the last time you had it opened. I already have a PSD file saved right here. That's what this export file is, so I'm not going to worry about saving again. I haven't made any changes. But generally, when you save the first time, you're definitely going to want to save a Photoshop file just so you have access to all of your editing and all of your layers and everything. What you want to note with the Photoshop or .psd file, though, is that it will not be readable by most browsers and most programs. So let's say I wanted to put this image into a Word document or a PowerPoint, or I wanted to put it online. Most browsers aren't going to read a PSD file. Most word processing programs aren't going to be able to read a PSD file, so I wouldn't be able to take this file and put it in the Word document. It just wouldn't work. It wouldn't appear. And you probably, in most programs, wouldn't even have the option to add it. So the workaround to this is to drop down the Save As type menu, and here you can see a bunch of different file types, some of which I'm sure you are familiar. So we have our PNGs, we have our JPEGs, our GIFs, our TIFFs, just a lot of different options. I'm going to go ahead and use a JPEG for this tutorial, just because a JPEG is probably the most universally accepted image file type. It's compatible with, most Word document programs. It's compatible with most browsers. Most anything you use is going to be able to read a JPEG document. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. We won't worry about any of those other settings. And once I hit save, you'll notice this JPEG options window appears. And if we were to save as any other file types, we would get a different window with a different set of options. So just be aware that the options that I cover here aren't going to be universal across file types. But I'm going to go ahead, because JPEG is so common, and talk about the different options that we have here. So your mat determines how the export handles blank pixels. So you'll notice here the background layer, the canvas of this image, is still white. And if I had painted it white, then it would actually have a white value, like white would be treated as a color. But since I haven't painted it, those are just empty pixels being represented by the color white. In reality, there's actually no data inside of them. So what this mat does is it tells the export how to handle these empty pixels. So we can either fill them in white, we can fill them in black. If you do none, it'll default to white, or you can change it to any color of your choosing. So you'll notice also one other thing, we don't have a transparency option. So if you just wanted this to stay a null, to stay as empty pixel information, which would be really handy if this was like a circular composition on top of a square canvas and we wanted just the circle to appear, then we wouldn't be able to export as a JPEG. We would want to use something like a PNG. All right, here you'll notice the quality settings. So the lower the quality, the more pixelated and blurry the image will become, but the smaller the file size will be as well. So if you're not using highly photographic images or images with like very low degrees of detail, then you can probably get away with smaller quality and smaller file sizes without actually losing a whole bunch of detail. But something like this is pretty high detail, so we'd want to do a higher quality setting, which preserves more detail, makes the export more accurate and clear, but as a consequence exports a larger file size. I'm actually not going to be using this image anywhere, so even though with something so photographic and detailed we would want high image quality, because I don't want to take up a bunch of room on my computer for an image I'm never going to use, I'm going to turn it way down for this export. These format options I never really worry about. Baseline, but I'm going to tell you what they mean anyways. They basically impact how the image will download or load when you view it on a browser or in a document. So baseline standard, you can't see the image until it loads all the way. Baseline optimized actually lowers the quality of the image by like 3 to 10%, I think, to make it load faster, and then loads the image in full. And progressive gradually loads your image, so it would start off super blurry and pixelated and gradually come into focus. And the higher the number of scans, the longer it would take to come into focus. So basically progressive sets it so that it loads as if the browser was horribly slow. Not sure why it's an option, but it is. So all these look good to me. I'm gonna go ahead and click OK. And now you can see in my folder, I have a JPEG called Kiki's. Fantastic. So apart from the save as function, which is honestly how I do 90% of my exporting, Photoshop also has an export function, and it just looks a little different. I'll go through it in a sec. The quick export as PNG is pretty self-explanatory. It exports your image as a PNG. All you have to do is choose your file location and hit save. You don't have to change your options at all, so that can be a pretty useful one. Save for web is if you had your image divided into slices. If you used the slice tool and had like different panels of your image, this would allow you to export those panels individually as their own images. I don't have any slices on this, so I'm not going to show you this either. But I will show you the export as function just because it varies slightly from the save as function. So if we go ahead and click export as, the export as window will open up. Its default is PNG. I'm gonna go ahead and change it to JPEG just so we're staying consistent. And you'll notice the settings are a little different. We actually lost a little bit of functionality. You'll see we can't change the quality or anything like that, but what we did gain was the ability to change our image and canvas size, which can be pretty useful. So let's say you don't want your image this big, you actually need it to be 1,000 pixels wide for whatever your purpose is. I'm gonna go ahead and change this to 1,000. The aspect ratio will be locked. And then I can export it at this size. Another thing to notice with this is the resampling determines, it basically tells the computer how to preserve the details of your image when you're resizing. So if I did something like nearest neighbor, then the pixels are just looking for their nearest neighbor, obviously, when it resizes. And you can see this fur here especially got really blurry. So making your resample, I'll actually do 2 up so you can see the difference. So this is the original image, this is the smaller one with the blurrier fur. So you just want to be aware of what your resample is sent to. Honestly, bicubic and bicubic automatic are usually the best options if you're resizing, so I wouldn't worry about changing this generally. Convert to sRGB will just make it more suited to web, especially if you're working in like CMYK color. Metadata, you can set, I don't have any metadata set right now, but this would just save also things like your copyright and contact info within the JPEG file itself. And here's a link for a tutorial on how to export in case mine is insufficient. This, I'm not sure what this button does. Let's skip it. And this zooms in and out, obviously. So I'll hit export. File name, we'll just call it Kikis2. Save. And your image is saved once more. And that, I believe, does it for our export video walkthrough.